Welcome to the Upper Room at St Clement's Church, Manchester. Join us as we discuss the Bible, theology and life.
Hello and welcome back to the Upper Room podcast. Hope you're doing well. As usual, my friend and colleague Paul Jump is here with me. How are you doing, Jumpy?
Very well, Henry. How are you?
I'm good. And excited, as I've just been telling you, that the Upper Room podcast is now available on YouTube. We are now into the 21st century.
Incredible.
Amazing. So you can find us on YouTube and your usual podcast places. There's no video with it because we thought you'd probably rather not see our faces, and we don't have like the mood lighting, but maybe one day we'll get there. We can be full on YouTubers.
Yes. You kind of need to like stare at the camera, don't you, and need to kind of be really cool.
That's it. We are really cool, but we're just not very good at staring at cameras. So, any highlight of your week? Anything been going on? Any news?
It's been a regular week, but looking forward to the weekend away next weekend.
Oh, why are you looking forward to the weekend away?
I love spending time with church family, and I love spending time listening to someone else preach. And I love listening to you, Henry. But we've got our friend Adam Bradley coming to speak to us on the book of Haggai. Another minor prophet. This will be the sixth minor prophet we'll have studied as a church. It's
good. And we've written a song on the book, all about building. The house, building in God's strength and with God's presence, but asking that question, what are you building your life on?
Yeah, it's a good question. And and hopefully Adam will challenge us, encourage us to build our life on the Lord Jesus this weekend.
Yeah, and you're going to spend the weekend away afternoon, you're going to go play some football, go for a walk?
I think probably go for a walk. Last year I went for a walk, and it was great in the Welsh countryside. I have played football in the past, but age catches up with us all, Henry.
No, I do. You wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know it. Yes, I'll probably be in the pool with the wee ones. So, which isn't my choice of activity, but there we go.
They love it, don't they? Absolutely love it.
Absolutely. And anyway, looking forward to the weekend away. And enjoying going through Leviticus still, though we'll be having a break this weekend, so there'll be no Upper Room podcast next week, but we are and have been in Leviticus, chapter 5 and 6.
We are, and we've been looking at the fifth offering. So Leviticus begins with 5 offerings that the worshipper was to offer to get themselves right with God and to stay right with God. And we've seen the burnt offering or the ascension offering, which is the first one, the foundational offering in chapter 1, where the worshipper offers a lamb as a substitutionary sacrifice for their sins. And that was offered morning and evening in the tabernacle, and then in the and then in the temple in the Old Testament. It was the foundation offering. And after that was the tribute offering of chapter 2, and that was offered every morning and evening after the ascension offering as our response to God for his grace, and that was his gratitude and thanks and praise and worship. Then there is the fellowship offering, which was offered from time to time by the worshipper to express their relationship with God, which came on the back of God's grace and our response to that in gratitude. And then the fourth offering is the purification offering. So when you messed up and became unclean through your sin, you don't need to get right with God again, but you needed to be cleansed in order to stay right with God, to stay in his presence. And so that's the purification offering, which you offered when you knew that you'd sinned. And that's for unintentional sins, inadvertent sins, so not premeditated, but where we mess up. And you can know what you're doing, but you hadn't planned beforehand to do it, but you just slipped. And then finally, there is the guilt offering, or reparation offering, to repair a broken relationship, or sometimes called the compensation offering, because often compensation needed to be paid. And that's the fifth offering, which we looked at yesterday.
Do you have any idea how often the offerings would have been made?
So the burnt offering and the tribute offering were offered daily at the tabernacle and temple. That was the morning and evening offering, morning and evening sacrifice. Individuals would come and offer it as well, but it was the morning and evening sacrifice. You could offer the tribute offering as a vote of thanks as well when a child was born or that sort of thing. The fellowship offering was a free will offering, so you offered it whenever you wanted to, just to express your love for God, and you could offer lots of different things. But it was really, the first two were commanded. The third one was free will, so just whenever you wanted. The purification offering was when you knew you'd done something bad and you should, you want to make amends. You want to be cleansed. It's when you feel guilty for something you've done. And then the final offering is where you feel guilty for something you've done and you need to make amends by paying compensation to repair the relationship. So the third one, fellowship offering, was as and when, and the last two were when you'd sinned, when you felt guilty.
Yeah. That's helpful. Thank you. So what struck you from this passage?
The thing that struck me overall is just how good and simple the offerings actually were, and how practical they are. That God has instilled in this offering system a way of making amends, a way of doing compensation to repair broken relationships with God and with others. It's brilliant.
And you gave the example of a prang in the Morrison's car park.
Yes, I tried to think of an example that just brought it out. Where saying sorry is just not enough. A debt has been incurred, and someone's got to pay that debt. Now, you can pay the debt. The person who has wronged you can pay the debt, or somebody else can come and pay the debt, but someone's got to pay the debt. Compensation needs to be made to fix the car. You can't just leave it abandoned. Well, that's an example, but with a car. But there are other examples with human relationships and with our relationship with God, where in order to really restore things properly, you got to pay compensation. You need to make amends in some way. And there are times where you think you might have done something, but you're not really sure what it is, and you don't need to make amends in that sense because you don't know who to pay the compensation to. But you do need to offer a sacrifice because in order to cleanse your guilty conscience.
That's really helpful. So this offering is about making amends.
Yes.
That's what's
behind it. That's what's and like I said, there's these three relationships between us and God, us and ourselves, and us and others. And when it comes to us and ourselves and we feel guilty for something, we're not sure what it is, you don't need to make amends because there's no one to make amends to, because you're not really sure what you've done, but you still feel guilty. And so it cleanses you provide the sacrifice to cleanse your guilty conscience. But the other two cases, you often need to make amends with God and with others. And the question is, how do you do that? And so the system in place basically says you offer the ram as a sacrifice for your sins. And all sin is ultimately against God. So even when you wrong somebody else, you offer the sacrifice of a ram. It's expensive. Or if you can't find a ram, if you can't get your hands on it, literally, you give them money, some silver to the treasury, and that's instead that's compensation. And then you sacrifice the lamb for your sins, but then you also need to pay back what you've taken, and you need to add 20% to it. That's really interesting. So paying back's not enough. So if you take something that you shouldn't, it's not just enough to give it back and say, I took this a year ago or 2 years ago, but you then pay compensation on top of that, 20% of its value. It's a great way to do life.
So would you carry that principle into the New Testament and the New Testament church, the principle of making amends and maybe compensation as well? How far would you push that for us today?
Well, it's interesting with Zacchaeus in Luke 19. And Zacchaeus, who has defrauded people, says, I'll pay back 4 times. That's incredible from Zacchaeus. It's not 20%. It's not paid back and then 20%. It's 4 times as much. It's a sign that he's been forgiven. And so you could pay more than 20%. And Zacchaeus does. And so what's the principle in the New Testament? The principle is you make amends in your relationships where you've wronged people. How does that apply today? Well, there's a lot of different ways. But if you've made money on the backs of others through defrauding them, then when you become a Christian, you need to start thinking, okay, I'm going to start paying people back. And I go above and beyond.
And use the example of the Nicholson shed. I love that example.
It's a very famous story from, I know it's from the 1920s, so a century ago, but it's a very famous story in Northern Ireland where the workers at the Harland and Wolff dockyard, the big shipyard in Belfast, started getting converted under the preaching of, there's a lot of preachers in the revival, but one of the most famous popular preachers was a Mr. Nicholson, and so when they started coming back with their tools, the shipyard owners didn't know what to do, so they had to build a shed, and they called it the Nicholson shed to store all the tools that had been taken. But that's what happens when the gospel hits you. Or like, I give the example of the cross and the switchblade. I was really struck when I read that book years ago, how when the gang were converted, they didn't just, put down their weapons and stuff. They took the weapons to the police station. And the police officer just didn't know what to do with all these gang members. I think the way it's written in the story was he was really afraid when they first came in, and then they all put all the weapons on the desk and said, we want to give up our fighting. This is what we've done, and because they want to make amends. I think it's that book where one of them actually ends up going to prison for something that he did because he owned up. And so making amends may involve going to prison. It may involve, paying some money. It may, whatever. But, it gets rid of your guilty conscience. And it's a sign that you're right with God.
Yeah. I love that book, The Crossing the Switchblade. Amazing. One person's asked, and I think this would be a good time to bring this question in, how does the guilt offering work for sins that didn't involve damaging or taking property? Does it apply more widely?
It does. And so one of the things that I said was, maybe you've made a promise to God to come to worship and you've not done that. And so you might pay some compensation. There is an example of a man who sleeps with a servant who is engaged to another man, and or a man who sleeps with a servant who isn't engaged to another man. But and what has to happen is the legal system's quite complicated. But basically, what has to happen is he offers a guilt offering, and as part of that guilt offering, he has to pay compensation, not to the woman, because in those days a woman was within the family, and so he'd have to pay compensation either to her fiancé or pay compensation to her father, depending on who the closest connection was. And that compensation would be the bridal price, whatever that was by then. And so that just shows that, if you were involved in some sort of abuse, you'd have to pay compensation to those you've abused. Now, if it was in the Old Testament consensual adultery, where you slept with somebody else's wife, and then that was done consensually, then the law in the Old Testament was that you were put to death. So that's not talking about that, but it is talking about where you're guilty for a crime, there's certain crimes like that where compensation is needed.
So would
another one's leprosy. Okay. So if you were a leper So this is talked about, I think, in Leviticus 14. If you're a leper, then as part of your cleansing ritual, you would offer a guilt offering. Now you go, well, why do you need to offer a guilt offering for being a leper? And maybe it's to do with the fact that for a period of time you've not been able to worship God because of your leprosy, and so you've not been able to give him the worship that is due, and so you pay a guilt offering in response to that, and so compensation might be required as part of that, as part of your offering to God. So those are examples. One of the commentators on the book of Leviticus said, "Yeah, this could be done. There could be quite a broad spectrum of things that involve compensation." So,
and feel free to say no, this is wrong. But would a potentially current and modern example be? We've sadly heard stories of kind of leaders who have not acted as they should, and have even there's been even stories this week of a big church that hasn't. There's been a bit of a cover-up culture potentially in the church, and actually there's moments where it's not enough to come out and say, "Oh, sorry, we made a mistake," and then just leave it at that. There's times like that where, and I don't know the specifics of all these situations, but there's times like that where actually there needs to be accountability, and actually a leader might need to step aside, and there might need to be justice might need to be pursued beyond just saying, "Oh, sorry," but then we just continue as we are. Is that where we're going?
I think that's exactly right. I think there is wrongs need to be righted, and so if if somebody's stolen some money from a church, as an example, then they pay that money back to the church plus an extra 20%. Now, that's if they own up. We're not talking about people who are caught. If you're caught, then you pay double, 200%. So, as compensation. On top of, you pay your money back, and then you pay same again, and you should offer a sacrifice for your sins as well. So, I do think that's a big thing in the for Christians.
Because you mentioned that Christians maybe have in the past could be accused of, you said, being soft. Like we're good, we're up for like mercy and forgiveness, but we're also people who believe in justice.
We do. And I think we're not acting as Christians when we don't do that. I think we say, yes, we are, we want to show mercy, we want to forgive, but there's times where justice needs to be done and seen to be done. And so it might be that somebody might have, so if somebody had stolen, if somebody had nicked your wallet, if somebody had found your wallet on the floor and then taken it, and you'd asked around and they'd said, no, it's not me, and then they'd come back to you and said, oh, actually, it was me, then you could say, and they said, oh, I want to give you the money back and the compensation, you could say, you don't need to do that. But it's the fact that they're offering it. And so whether you take it from them is the difference to them actually, I'm guilty, this is what I want.
Yeah, that's really helpful because, there's the classic Jean Valjean story in Les Mis where he steals the silver cup and the bishop goes, oh, no, he didn't do that, and then he gives him more and he shows it, and that's one...
So that's, and that's him not actually acknowledging his guilt.
Yes. Which
is interesting. I remember reading a story, and I can't remember what had happened, but basically somebody was in court on trial because they'd done something against a Christian, and the person who had been offended, the Christian, went to court and basically said, yes, they have done this, yes, it was wrong, they shouldn't have done it, they deserve to be punished, but I don't want any compensation from it. I don't want to press charges, I don't want to, I don't want to see this person, their life, be damaged or whatever as a result. Now, you can do that as a Christian. But you've still got to be very clear, this is what they deserve.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I guess maybe applying it relationally, it's a kind of, okay, maybe I've wronged someone relationally. And I'm not just going to say sorry for this thing. I don't just want to get to par, if that makes sense. Actually, maybe I want to say sorry, but then I want to really seek to move towards that person and to build that relationship rather than just to get back on a level playing field. Maybe there's a family feud. It's not just about kind of maybe you want to go further than sorting out and getting whatever, sorting out that situation, and then you want to work on building on a relationship, moving towards that person in love. Maybe that could be what it looks like on a relational level.
Yeah,
taking responsibility for my part, making amends, and then as a kind of relational compensation, I guess, going, yeah, I'm going to now continue to seek to move towards you, whatever that looks like. Yeah.
And now, that was an interesting question to do with the where it doesn't involve property and stuff. But lots of stuff in life does involve money and property.
Yeah.
And, as a Christian, you kind of, you want to make amends for that. When you've been at fault.
Yeah. And we should do the next couple of questions. Was the tabernacle ever cleaned?
Yes. So, in Numbers chapters 1 to 4, Moses discusses the Levites, and there was the three groups of Levites mentioned, three divisions, as it were, of Levites. So this is straight after Leviticus, and after the sacrifices and how to be right with God and how to live right with God. It talks about at the beginning of Numbers, it talks about the people and numbers them, basically. That's what Numbers is about. But then it talks about the sons of Aaron, and it divides them into three main groups, and those groups all have different roles. There's the sons of Gershon, the sons of Kohath, and the sons of Merari. This is mentioned in chapter 3, and then in chapter 4 it talks about the duties. And basically the sons of Gershon, their role was the physical objects in the tabernacle. The altar, the candlestick, the utensils for the burnt offerings, and all of that. That's their job, to look after them, to make sure that they were up to spec, any damages were repaired, they were cleaned, and so on. Then you had the Kohathites. They had their job was wrong way around. The Kohathites, that was their job with the lampstands. The Gershonites, let me get this right, the Gershonites' job was the hangings of the temple, the hangings of the tabernacle, so the material. So the Gershonites were the material, the Kohathites were the utensils, and the Marlites and the Mushites, who belonged to the clan of Merari, their job was the pillars and the pegs and the cords and the poles and all of that. So the physical structure. So you have some guys who were into textiles, some guys who were into metal work of different descriptions, and some guys who were into the wooden frame and pegs and all of that, woodwork. And so those Levites will make sure that they were transported. When the tabernacle was transported, they were maintained and they were cleaned.
Good effort. Go the Gershonites. What legends.
And so, what's interesting is in 2 Chronicles, let me get it right, 2 Chronicles 29, you have Hezekiah. Hooray!
Woohoo!
A great king arises in Judah, Hezekiah, and he cleanses the temple. And what does he do when he starts to cleanse the temple? He says, Levites, go and do your job. cleanse the temple. And so they went into all the different parts of the temple, depending on who they were, these Levites, and they made sure that it was cleansed. Everything bad was taken out, everything good was put in, all the stuff was prepared properly, and so that the temple could be used once again for the worship of God. So that was the job of the Levites.
And I guess that's why there's so much emphasis in Ezra and Nehemiah of the Levites coming back from exile, and Haggai's, we're going to look at the weekend away, saying, guys, you've built your homes, but you need to sort out the temple so we can worship God. Yeah. And that's really helpful. So
the Levites weren't the butchers. They were the priests. The priests were the ones who offered the sacrifices, although sometimes, I think this happened in the time of Solomon, that some of the Levites had to be consecrated to offer and help with the sacrifices because there were so many sacrifices offered that the priests couldn't do it all by themselves. That's incredible. I think that's 1 Chronicles 23, or that kind of chapter. But the Levites' job was to make sure the worship of God continued through the physical things, but also through the teaching. So the Levites did a lot of the teaching, So in Ezra was I think he was a Levite, and so they involved with the teaching of the law.
So all priests were Levites, but not all Levites were priests.
Yeah.
Cool. Does that map on slightly to anything in the New Testament, like elders and deacons?
So all priests were members of the came from Aaron. Yeah. But they came from Aaron rather than just coming from Levi.
But Levi came from Aaron.
No, Aaron came from Levi.
Oh yeah,
Levi's son of Jacob.
Got you.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So you could be a Levite and not a priest. Yes, I don't think it maps onto the New Testament, apart from Jesus.
Hooray!
Who is a priest, although he's not from Levi.
Absolutely. Read Hebrews for more information. Hebrews 7 for more information.
Is that helpful in terms of... So basically, the priests who offered the sacrifices, and they did the business, but the Levites made sure that everything was... There were stewards, the guards. Yeah, so they were also the guards around the temple or tabernacle as well, to make sure everything was protected. So, that was their job.
Top stuff. Let's get through these next couple of questions. Good questions. Is there a link between the ram mentioned in Leviticus 5 and the substitute ram for Isaac in Genesis 22, verse 13?
Yes.
What?
I just think it's very interesting that when you read the book of Genesis, after reading the book of Leviticus, that lots of this stuff was already in practice amongst the people. So the book of Job was probably written before Leviticus, and I was reading this morning in Job chapter 1 that when every morning Job would offer a burnt offering, an ascension offering for his children in case they'd sinned the night before. And so already in Israel there was these things were practiced. The burnt offering was practiced morning by Job. And that's not part of... He's not from Levi, he's not part of one of the priests, he's not... But there's this sense, way back when, that this is how to be right with God. You see that even earlier when you go back to Noah and the flood. If you believe Job happened post-flood, which I think he probably did. But you have Noah. And when he came out of the ark, he offered a burnt offering. And so there's this sense that this is the way to be right with God, an ascension offering, and so on. So when it came to the ram, when Abraham took Isaac up, he met Moriah to offer him as a sacrifice, and he offered the ram instead. There it is, burnt offering. But there you see very clearly this burnt offering isn't for Abraham, it's for the son, Isaac, and Isaac somehow is the burnt offering. It's developing the picture. And Jesus would ultimately be that son. So yes, the ram in the burnt offering for the guilt offering, although it's a lamb in the burnt offering, but all of these offerings, they're all linked together. You see it. Yes.
Great. Okay, last question. Someone's really encouraging, said, I've really enjoyed how you've shown how Leviticus points to Jesus. I've read it many times before and not seen these links before. What advice would you give for reading Leviticus in this way?
My first piece of advice would be to read Hebrews, because Hebrews links back to Leviticus quite closely. I think the second thing is it is helpful to have some sort of commentary as you go through the book. I don't always say that with books of the Bible, but I do think it's true with Leviticus, because I'm seeing new things all the time in Leviticus. Just things like, why the kidneys, why the liver, why the fat, why were these burnt? And I'm guessing. So I want to look at other people and their guesses to see if my guesses match up, and sometimes I have no clue at all. Why the kidneys? And so, yeah, I think it is helpful. So the ESV Study Bible is very good. Just provide a little bit of a commentary on Leviticus, because, it's talking a language which we don't talk. If you were brought up in Israel at the time, if you were a child brought up in Israel at the time, you'd learn this probably as the first book of the Bible to learn. And it'd be quite basic stuff. And you'd understand all the symbolism and the pictures and everything, and you'd apply it to your life. And it would just be second nature. It's not second nature to us. And now somebody might say, oh, well, what's the point in looking at this? Why, because we've got the New Testament, that's fine. But actually, it does shed light on what Jesus has done and why he had to come. And it shows us that the gospel is a gospel of grace in the Old Testament as well as the New.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think if you don't have any resources and you want one thing to help you read through the Bible, I think the ESV Study Bible was a great shout to look at. As we close, Jumpy, this time tomorrow?
If you need to make amends with God or with other people, do so. But do so in the full knowledge that your debt has been paid already by the Lord Jesus Christ. Sacrifice and making amends are at the heart of the Christian faith.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jumpy, for your thoughts, and thanks everyone for your questions. Do keep sending them in. Slido.com, #St Clements. Do catch up with the sermons or the Upper Room podcast on YouTube, or connect with us via our church website. But most of all, we'd love to see you on a Sunday, either Sunday morning at 10:30, Sunday evening at 6:30. But wherever we see you, we'll catch you soon. Goodbye.
God bless.